All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. We're still diving into the Big Ten transfer portal. We've got Illinois we're covering today. They made a couple moves, nothing too crazy. We're going to start off with Cody here, hear his thoughts. Who was their best transfer? They only got, I believe, 2. But, Cody, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have to do a ton from like a volume perspective. Obviously, the guys that they're replacing were very productive players last season. Kasparis Yakichonis, Merez Johnson Jr., Trey White, Will Riley as well. So they had a couple first rounders plus a really talented big man in Johnson. But I would say the best one that they got in return was Andrea Stojakovic coming from Cal. He averaged 18 a game on not so efficient shooting. I mean, you can attribute some of that to the talent he was playing around, the types of shots he was taking. I think attributes to that a little bit more. He's not all that efficient outside of the paint, but he is very good at getting to his spots and pick and roll and getting to the rim and getting to the free throw line at a pretty high rate. So he's probably going to be the number one option on this team from night number one. I guess kind of depending on how the Serbian transfer Bahalo Petrovic sort of translates. He's already 22 years old, going to be coming over here as not sure what they're classing him as, either a sophomore, probably a sophomore or freshman. But overall, I think Stojakovic is a really talented scorer who's, like I said, he's going to be a little bit more paint, rim, and mid-range reliant. I'm a little bit concerned overall about the perimeter jumper. I thought he was going to make a little bit more of a leap last season, but his release still looks a little more like awkward and a bit inconsistent, and just didn't knock it down at the clip I expected relative to where he was at 2 years ago at Stanford. But he's from a national scale. I don't really love how he's going to translate. Like I don't know if he's going to elevate them to being like a top 10, 12 or top 15 team in the country, but he's a really good get. He's a really talented 3-level scorer overall. So, and by default, they only got 2 transfers, him and Big Z coming from Arkansas. I think by default, he's definitely the best get that they got.
Marcus, what do you think about these offseason moves?
Yeah, I mean, they were planned to replace, like Cody said, Yakichonis and Will Riley in the scoring department, and they went and did their best to do that and getting Stojakovic. He struggled efficiency-wise at times last year, right? Under 32% from 3, about 42% from the field. Obviously playing on a not great Cal team where teams can kind of really focus in on him. But for what like Brad Underwood needed, I don't hate the get, especially for conference play. I think that Stojakovic is definitely going to help them, be in that top 5 of the Big Ten. At least that's kind of where I expect them to be. His scoring punch should greatly help that. As for Big Z, I mean, I feel like you just never know what you're going to get with him. Some games he'll show up and play pretty well, and then another game he'll just be kind of a ghost and take a bunch of dumb threes, and you just get really frustrated with him. But like from a production standpoint, last year, I mean, played about half a game, averaged 8 points, 2 blocks. So I mean, obviously he's going to add some rim protection presence at 7'2". I just think that for as big as he is, he falls in love with playing like a guard a bit too much. He wants to take threes and kind of ill-advised shots sometimes. So we'll see, I guess, what Brad Underwood can kind of morph him into playing alongside his brother. But I don't hate the moves they made. I think that, like you said, Cody, nationally, I don't really see this as being a team that can compete for a national title. But I do think they can compete for like a Big Ten title. I think they're probably good enough to do that.
With all the losses they had, from last season, do we think they got better or worse with just adding on a couple guys?
I mean, I think it's pretty similar to what they were last year. I think they underachieved last year. They had a ton of injuries. They had guys get sick in the middle of the year. Thomas Lavovicic was sick for like a month and a half. He had mono, and then he had some. I don't know, I think that kind of just carried on throughout the entire season. And Yakuchonis missed a few games, and he had a wrist injury that kind of lingered throughout the entire season. And yeah, just last year, just nothing really broke their way, and they still were able to be a 6 seed and win a game in the NCAA tournament. That's kind of where I see them again. I mean, they're talented across the board. The scoring talent's absolutely there. Depending on what Petrovic is, I haven't dove into what he's going to be all that much yet. And then bringing guys like Kylan Boswell back, Ben Hummerkaus on the wing, and Thomas Lavovicic, like I said, and they're going to get Ty Rogers back, who redshirted last year. He's going to be a bit of a defensive presence and can be a playmaker on the offensive end. He's not going to really provide much of a scoring punch, but I do kind of see this team being fairly similar to last season. Similar system, and they're going to let it fly from 3, obviously, and that's where Big Z kind of fits in as a pick and pop guy, and overall just as a pick and roll man. I think he should really thrive in this system. I mean, he shot 16 of 34 on pick and pop threes last year at Arkansas. I think it's going to be utilized way more in this offense that is looking to take open threes at almost every chance that they get. And so I do think he's going to fit in really well in that regard. But like you mentioned, Marcus, he's a rather poor decision maker across the board. The shot selection gets really iffy at times. Like he'll honestly, I mean, he'll fire away off the bounce. He'll take some sidestep threes that are very ill-advised. I mean, he'll knock them down sometimes, which is crazy. He's a really talented shot maker for being 7'2". But yeah, it kind of lives on the perimeter a little bit too much. I think he struggles to get to the rim. Honestly, there's obviously not like a ton of like dribble creation or an ability to get to the rim off the bounce from the perimeter. But overall, he's a really interesting talent, like I said, and I do think this team is talented across the board. But I do kind of see them being in the same area as last year.
Marcus, what are your expectations?
Yeah, to speak to Cody's point about Big Z first, like I remember one game, I think last year, right in front of the Arkansas bench, he goes like sidestep 3. He shot it kind of low. It kind of got tipped or deflected or something, and it went out of bounds. And Big Z didn't even turn to look at the scorer's table. He just walked straight to the bench. And Coach Cal was just like shaking his head in frustration. But I think pretty similarly as well. I think I don't really see them being a ton worse than last year. I guess maybe they could be a spot or two worse, but I think pretty similar with the potential to maybe be like a seed or two better, depending on how things break for them. Like Cody said, if they can stay healthy, they're going to be big up front. They're going to have some guys that can make some shots. Ty Rogers is coming back. He's not a shooter, but he can defend. So I don't hate this team. I just think they're very capped on what they can do on a national level. So I think they'll be right there in the mix in the Big Ten and maybe be a little bit better than last year.
Yeah, let's do a tournament ceiling and floor. Cody, what do you think?
Floor's pretty high. I mean, they're pretty talented across the board. Like I said, they're going to rebound the ball well with the Avicic twins up front, probably splitting minutes, maybe even playing a few minutes side by side. And there's Stojakovic, Boswell, Petrovic, Hummerkaus is a really good group on the perimeter. Not, like I said, not a top 10 group in my opinion. So, but I do think I'd say their floor is probably at 7, 8. Maybe if they run into some injuries, like I'm not going to speculate on any of that stuff. But so I'd probably say 7 or 8 if healthy. Maybe a 4 or 5, because I thought last year's team could have been a 2 or 3 seed if they stayed completely healthy. They lost some games that they really shouldn't have last year, and I think they were pretty unlucky from a shooting perspective last year. They just couldn't make an open 3 to save their lives with some really talented shooters on that roster. So I do think if luck is on their side a little bit more and they stay relatively healthy, I think this year's team could be probably a 4 or a 5. I think the window is pretty small for this team overall.
Marcus, let's hear your predictions.
Yeah, I agree. I think ceiling 4, floor, I was going to say 7. I think they're pretty narrowed in on where they're going to finish. They're not going to be the best team in the country, but they're also, I don't think they're bad enough talent-wise where they could really fall below that. Maybe there is a world where they can, like Cody said, depending on injuries, if anything happened. But as they're currently constructed, I think 7 is probably the worst they're going to be.
Any final thoughts for these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I just with Stojakovic a little bit. I mean, you're going to have some games where he looks like the best player on the floor. He had a few games last year where he had 30 or 35 on super efficient shooting, but it's just his shot diet overall and just his efficiency outside of the paint isn't all that great. So, I mean, you're going to have some games where he goes 4 for 15, 4 for 16 from the floor, and almost that doesn't shoot your team out of the game just because they have so much talent around him. But he's going to really lose some value if he's not knocking down shots, and because he's not really all that great of a playmaker. He's not an elite athlete. He's not really a great defender, but there are 3-level scoring abilities in there, and he's going to, like I said, he's going to look really good some nights.
Marcus, what are your final thoughts?
No, I mean, just to piggyback off what Cody said, like some nights Stojakovic is going to kind of disappear, not necessarily, in terms of not taking shots. He'll just disappear in the scoring column because he'll have his inefficient nights. It happens because he takes a lot of shots, and he's not a great 3-point shooter, so sometimes he's going to just be inefficient, and he takes some tough ones. And I think last year he'll probably have to learn a little bit earlier on this year, because last year he grew probably a bit accustomed to taking some tough ones because he had to at Cal. I think early in the season we could see him struggle a little bit just in terms of overall shot selection, because he's not playing with he's playing with much better players now at Illinois than he was at Cal. So I think it'll be a learning experience for him, and he will have his bad nights like anybody, but I think he may be a bit more prone to them.
All right, we'll wrap things up here. As always, thank you guys for listening to the Mainly Hoops podcast.